I guess on the downside, it's not better to be in a higher tax bracket. But besides that, Florida State Seminoles Live, we will explain in just a few minutes. Welcome in another Wednesday show here, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Mark Rogers here along with Logan Robinson, Noel Game Day. Of course, we've got Chris Frazier here from Spear Addicts to help us shoulder the load, carry you through the off season. Leave those comments and questions in the live chat. We will be here for the next 55 or so, talking Florida State football with all of you. So again, you ultimately produce the show. Leave those comments and questions. Logan, Chris, how you guys doing?
Doing
Pretty
great.
Good, Mark. How are you?
Phenomenal.
Excellent. All right. Well, we will dive into some money talk because Mike Norvell has satisfied his bosses with 10-3, 6 consecutive wins, and things looking good for 2023. So I see a contract extension here through 2029 at an average of just over $8 million per year at 8.05. Let's see. Initially received a 6-year, $26.5 million deal. So that's about $4.5 million per year. So not a bad jump, Logan.
No, not bad at all. I like that they decided to do this on Wednesday whenever we all have our shows going on. And it turned out perfect. I was just talking about this earlier today with a friend at the gym and brought up, now the true test for Florida State as an administration is how long do you give an extension to Mike Norvell, and how long can you keep him? And sure enough, a couple hours later, he gets a deal done with Florida State, and it goes through 2029. And a lot of people, at least from Twitter's side and FSU's fan base, seems pretty positive about it, which is great to see. Some maybe wanted to see after this upcoming season, see how the outcome is of that to really give, an evaluation of how much money, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Let the experts and what Michael Alford and the people around him take care of business. That's what their job is. So they evaluated him, and going all the way through 2029 is huge. And, Florida State as a football program has a lot of projects that they're working on, including building their football only facility. And before arriving to Florida State, Mike Norvell had put together a couple binders and laid out a game plan for different phases year to year to year on what they want to do. And one of those was probably earning that extension to where now you'll be here to take care of the football only facility and the operations, and being able to utilize that on the recruiting side of things, and also now retaining players, which is probably now going to be the biggest part going into 2024. We're kind of forgetting that, it's cool to get the players to the program, but keeping them for another year, another 2 years is even bigger. So retaining is something Florida State is going to want to do. So seems like kind of Mike Norvell's game plan and couple of binders that he put together is seeming to work out well, but well-deserved, at least in my opinion, just to see the turnaround and the absolute, that he had to come through, which we've discussed plenty of times on here, Mark. It wasn't pretty. So in my opinion, it's a well-deserved raise, and it's a lengthy extension to where you're now hoping, this is a regular year-to-year competing for ACC championships under Mike Norvell and getting to the playoffs.
What do you think, Chris?
Me personally, I'm extremely satisfied that they went ahead and did the extension for Coach Norvell. I think we had been anticipating it on our show for the past couple of weeks. I kind of thought that they were going to do it just a few weeks after the bowl game, and it took longer, obviously, which I can completely understand why. Obviously, there's, Florida State's got some things math-wise that you're going to have to go through and kind of figure out where all those dollars come from. Like Logan had spoke on, with the standalone facility going up, then they've also got the new health center that's going up, and they've got all these upgrades that are going on at different stadiums. The soccer field got new turf, etc. So all these things cost money, and then you got to think the last year. If I'm not mistaken, this is the last year that Coach Taggart's getting paid from Florida State, so it should come off of the docket in 23 or 24. I'm not real sure. I need to look at that, but I know it's soon. He's going to be off. So maybe everyone will quit saying that Florida State's broke. I'm surely hoping so, because it's obviously not the case. With hiring Patrick Surtain, I'm sure he wasn't cheap. Being able to retain Coach Atkins after what he's been able to prove here at this program, I'm sure isn't cheap. And then Coach Norvell being able to prove with staff what they were able to do in the 2022 season with 10 wins and only 3 losses. It's well deserved. Like Logan had said, it's definitely deserved. And now it keeps you really competitive. And best case scenario is if somebody does come after him, you can recoup some of that money because they would have to buy that contract out. Don't think that he's going anywhere. That's not what I'm saying. But if he was to ever decide to leave, now there's money that has to be paid to Florida State if he does leave.
Mike Alford made the statement here, and it's the typical type of speak that you typically get, but I think he said a lot here in the first statement, and Logan alluded to it because this was a talking point here and on any Florida State platform that knows what it's talking about concerning culture. And that's kind of a buzzword, a catchword, but it was a real thing at Florida State. So the 10-3, obviously that's the bottom line, wins and losses. That's what you have to see, the results. But what all the blood, sweat, and tears that poured into the result of 10-3, because all sorts of programs and coaches go through situations where they've got a fairly marginal team, but they catch a couple lucky breaks and they pull out a 9-3 season, and that's all it is. But I think that this athletic department and administration sees a guy that took on a lot of dysfunction, a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of bad vibes, a lot of bad morale. And he was able to distinguish, who is truly in it here that we can keep around, who needs to be shown the door, how can I energize and uplift this program and these athletes. And, basically anybody that had any connection to winning big football games is gone. And I've got to take a lot of players that are used to losing, and maybe some of them are satisfied with that, and others hate losing, but they don't know how to win. And I got to completely revamp this whole thing. So it's more than just going from winning 5 and 6 games for a 4 or 5 year stretch to winning 10 one year. It's, as you guys know better than me, it's what he's done to that locker room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot that he's had to endure at once. I mean, first week arrival almost, it felt like. And there was a few players that were already on the team that weren't really with the vision that Mike Norvell had right away. And it's really fun to watch, at least being there at practices and see the year-to-year change of some of the guys, the veterans like an Akeem Dent, of course, Jordan Travis, but multiple other players like a Fabian Lovett, guys that continued to believe in that process and to where they think they can get. And now it seems like a mentality has changed. And that's something that Florida State has needed for a very long time. And I bring it up all the time, accountability. Florida State really needed that, that last year, Jimbo Fisher, maybe even before that, you started losing accountability after that 2014 season a little bit. Guys getting a little more selfish, looking ahead at the league and not thinking about themselves and week by week of the opponents that they're taking on. And, this team is, playing for one another. And that takes a lot from a head coach to be able to build that in a short period of time with the stuff like you were just talking about, Mark, coming into what, Willie Taggart had left for him. That was a mess all around. There's some things that we can't even talk about on here that a lot of people know what happened. And, just to think what Mike Norvell had to go through to, fix things in Tallahassee wasn't the easiest, but that was just one step. You got to go over and you got to fix on the recruiting trail too. Make these recruits not forget who Florida State is. Yeah, they know the name, but you don't want to see them getting blown out by Clemson by 40 points on a Saturday. That's not what you're used to as a young player, young recruit. You're used to watching Dalvin Cook, Derwin James, Jameis Winston absolutely tear it up as they are, like Jalen Ramsey out in the league now. They watch those players. And that's something Mike Norvell had to get Florida State's brand as a football program back on the map. And the best way to do that is go and beat your rivals and be able to compete with Clemson And now I think Florida State's put them at a spot now where we're, starting to talk a lot about the 2023 season, where the expectation is at one of the highest it's been since those latter years of Jimbo Fisher. Now you're expected to be in an ACC championship from here on out. You're expected to hopefully compete in the future of the college football playoff. Now, definitely with that expanding, there's an even bigger expectation. And two, the ACC divisional, the divisional side of things, that's gone. It's just your top 2 teams will play up there in Charlotte. So, this is something that he's had to work on and do. And I think for Florida State fans to see 10 wins, you beat Oklahoma at the end of the season, you're able to beat LSU, and you beat both your in-state rivals. I think FSU fans should be they should allow for Mike Norvell to get this extension. And I think some fans too think, they get the extension, so now things are going to be laid back, and he's just kind of just going to rest and no longer going to climb, I guess you could say. I think this only secures a lot of things, and most importantly for recruiting moving forward, it shows families, it shows players that the future is under Mike Norvell in Tallahassee, and I think it was a smart move to do this at the appropriate time. And Michael Alford, I won't go against a lot of things Michael Alford does, I'll be honest with you guys. So I think it was a smart move to do this.
Well, that definitely makes 2 of us. I'm not going to go against Alford either. I think the moves that he's making are top notch of any athletic director across the country. And something that Logan was saying, that, the things that can't be talked about, those obstacles that are added to the obstacles that everybody obviously does know. It's amazing to me on a 3 short year span of how much Norvell and his staff has turned around, and Michael Alford being a huge part of that as well. But going from what we were, 4 and 5 years ago to winning 10 ball games in the 2022 season, it doesn't show that you just have better athletes on the field. It doesn't show that just coaches are doing a better job on the field coaching wise, or maybe that we're training better as far as practice goes. Like what Logan was talking about as far as the culture goes. The culture was the biggest issue in my opinion. I think most people's opinion would be the culture was completely sideways from what any Florida State fan had ever been used to. So to see what Coach Norvell and the staff has been able to do culture-wise is amazing. And I think what speaks the loudest to that, not the 10 wins that we just got, but the amount of guys that are returning that could have went on to the NFL, or that could have transferred to a team that might be, it could have been a potential better fit for them, but instead they stayed, not only last year, but according to an analyst from ESPN, which I've been doing as many of these percentage things as I can on returning production for Florida State, we're considered the team that has the most returning product out there. So to get these guys that could potentially have went on to the NFL, or maybe the USFL or the XFL, or et cetera, but Mike Norvell put on his recruiting cap in a different way, but to get guys to want to stay and basically run the season back of 2022. And let's just, hopefully clean up a couple of more plays or a couple of things that may have happened, and even come out with a better season in 2023. And the recruiting obviously has gotten to be much better. I think the 24 class, I've said this multiple times, so this isn't Mark or Logan that's stating this, but I think that the 24 class will be the best class that Norvell has ever recruited as a head coach, regardless if that's at Florida State or at Memphis. I think that this is going to be the best class that he's recruited as a head coach in his entire tenure. So with me saying that, I think Florida State, if they continue to have the mentality that they have, which is Coach Norvell's mentality, Michael Alford's mentality, and even up to the president, I think that everyone's on the same page, not just in the same book anymore, so to speak. I think there was times where Florida State at least we were all reading the same book, but everybody was on complete different chapters. Now it seems like the Florida State is starting to just put everything together and really start clicking on all cylinders, regardless if that's on the field or off the field, because just the way the guys are performing in the classroom on top of everything else, just That's a mentality. It's not just, okay, these guys are all doing better just because. No, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of mental strengthening for that to start taking place. And I'm going to give huge credit to Coach Storms and his staff for Tour of Duty, because I believe that mental aspect of what they do in Tour of Duty sets up the entire mental base and mentality for the entire season and seasons to come.
Yeah, and definitely while the transfer portal, and even though the coaches aren't necessarily dealing with the NIL, that's a whole other layer that is connected to both recruiting, the transfer portal from the standpoint of going out and getting players, but also retaining players. And it just gives another evaluation for every head coach. And Mike Norvell, from the transfer portal standpoint, is obviously hitting it out of the park. And the recruiting is showing good signs, but needs to get better. But again, the transfer portal, they have to, in their evaluation, Alford and everybody else involved in their evaluation of Mike Norvell, have to be looking at the transfer portal and saying, well, this is the future of college football. It's the present, and therefore it's the future. And Mike Norvell obviously has shown that he knows how to recruit veteran players, not just high school players, but veteran players, and show them what he's got going at Florida State. And it's been impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, veterans, big time. And, this is even crazier and scarier maybe to believe, but, this is going to be their best transfer class, at least if you go off the rankings and ratings and all that kind of crap. But this will be, ranking wise, their best transfer class coming in. A lot of guys, just to mention Jaheim, and then you got Cypress too. Two guys, Fintrell Cypress and Jaheim Bell, two guys, veteran guys that are coming here to make a decision, and it's a big one because they're looking ahead to the league and to come play, to spend your last little bit of time. It's almost like the biggest part of your college career here is allowing for such a short time period, just like Jermaine Johnson, to come for that short of a time to believe and build trust that quickly into a staff. And Florida State, not only Mike Norvell, but outside off-field staff like Derek Ray, Florida State's general manager, they've been able to build those relationships and build the trust, and also be able to show that out onto the field with a product to sell to the next year of transfers or even recruits. But it's a different kind of recruiting cap you've got to put on if it's either an older guy in the transfer portal or you're doing recruiting. It's all over the place at this point. But Florida State has done a good job, and Michael Alford allowing to build that off-field staff. But I don't think they're done there yet with, what they want to do on the off-field staff type of realm. I think during this offseason, we'll see some new additions, because it's gone to show that it has been such a great asset for Florida State in just a year practically, for a handful of names that have been added to the staff. So I can see Mike Norvell and Alford, I'm sure that's in their game plan for, coming into spring and getting ready for fall ahead. So something that Florida State should continue to utilize. We see it from multiple other programs across the country, and it pays out well for them in the long haul.
Folks in the chat are concerned about Alex Adkins moving on. Isn't it pretty standard that when a coach gets this kind of bump, that there's also money there directed toward the football program to say, hey, the coaching staff's going to be rewarded as well?
Yes. That's a loaded question. Obviously, Atkins is a huge part of what Florida State's success has become. And I think if there's anyone at this point other than Coach Norvell that you make sure is happy financially, it is Atkins. Atkins did sign an extension, was it last season, if I'm not mistaken? So he did just come off of an extension itself, but I'm sure that there's some type of bag put back, so to speak, for Atkins. And I think that they will, because Atkins is one that you have to hold on to. He's one of your most talented coordinators or other coaches. So they'll do whatever is necessary to make sure Atkins stays here, as long as it's, within reason. So I don't have any fear that we're about to lose Coach Atkins. Now next year, maybe the year after, but especially next year, he'll be a hot commodity. There'll be plenty of teams come and ask, hey, we got this head coaching position, etc. Just depends on if Atkins wants to, drop down into the lower part of the FBS or maybe the top of the FCS to be a head coach and work his way up from there, or if he wants to continue to build potentially a legacy at Florida State and then start getting Power 5 offers right off the dot, because it's usually what great coaches can do. So just depending on Florida State's success over the next season or two, depends on where Atkins ends up. But we'll see how that goes.
I think for Atkins too, I don't see him leaving for an offensive coordinator job somewhere, an offensive line job elsewhere. The position that he'd be taking would be a head coaching job, like you were just saying, Chris. I think it would be somewhere lower at a lower FBS level, and absolutely, if he wants to do that, and I think eventually that will be the case for him. But if you're looking at competitively with other colleges, I think Florida State and what Alfred has shown us, they will try to do quite a bit to keep him in store with Florida State. And it goes to show too, a lot of things recruiting wise also is on Atkins' shoulders too, as we've seen the last couple of seasons. Atkins sometimes will dip outside of his position to help recruit on a few players, some recruits at the high school level, definitely at the transfer level too. A lot of offensive linemen coming to want to play for Alex Atkins. You got players from across the country, Auburn. I mean, you've got guys that hear about Alex Atkins, and I think for him, the biggest thing, I think his best tactic is relationships. He's got a few guys that he's been able to say, yeah, I put them into the league. Those are my guys. But from what he's been able to do and get these guys into the fold has been relationships, and he does a very good job at that. So Florida State, the only concern here would be maybe after next season, he maybe looks into taking a head coaching job somewhere, but I don't see him leaving for another school, leaving for an offensive coordinator position, offensive line. It doesn't make sense to me. I think Florida State on their end would be able to do what they need to do. They'll load up the Brinks truck for him.
Do you guys know anything about this issue that Kevin Hickson's bringing up here about the state of Florida trying to cap NIL?
I have not read up on a whole ton of that. I know that's kind of been a pretty heavy discussion on Twitter, I feel like, the last week or two. The whole NIL stuff is a whole different world to me. Definitely when you're talking about Florida and the state and the laws that they're going to try to do. But I don't want to comment on it because I would be just saying blasphemous crap. I wouldn't know what I'm talking about, and I just act like I'm lying to y'all. So I don't know any part of that. Maybe Chris does, but that kind of, I would definitely need to look at an article or two to see what that's all about, because I know it's very, right now, Florida teams, it went from where Florida State wasn't doing so great in it, what 12, 15 months ago, to where now it seems like they are the hot school in the state for representing NIL and getting deals for players at Florida State, across football, across other programs. So something's going right in FSU's direction, it seems.
This whole conversation about capping the NIL and stuff of that nature is based off of one particular situation that Rashada potentially had down in Gainesville with Florida. Some reporter or beat writer wrote that there was a $13 million offer, and with no factual contract being sent out there for people to see, making that public or not. I will say that if anyone had offered a $13 million contract to anyone, it would by far be the largest one that has ever been offered NIL-wise in the state of Florida. So that would be the reason that it's spoken on. I personally, not for 1 second, believe that type of money was offered to a high school kid, regardless of who it is or regardless of what they do. I have seen so many NIL deals from schools across the state of Florida for certain connections, as far as athletes wanting me or James Coleman to look into what the deal is and if it requires too much for them to be able to do due to the amount of stuff that's being asked as a student athlete. And there hasn't been a deal anywhere near that type of number for gentlemen that have definitely proven themselves that definitely would be considered a higher end player. So I don't think that there's too much merit to this conversation on capping in any amount of money in the state of Florida. I think that you have people that are talking on this matter that don't know a whole lot about what they're talking about. I do know that this month is when that legislation bill goes up for vote, whether we drop it or keep it. If we drop it, it allows us to do things that other states are doing to where the school can be more involved with the NIL portion. Right now, the coaches in school can't have much to do with the NIL deals in specific. So legislation goes up for vote this month. So by August of this year, we'll know in February if we've gotten rid of this legislation or not. But by August it will become into play, and then we'll start going by those rules by 2024. But there's no worry for me or any of the collectives that I've spoke to about there actually being a cap on players in the state of Florida.
I might be missing something here, and I am. And like Logan, I'm not going to say that much about it because I don't know. I don't know anything about this. This is the first that I've seen this, but I really don't know how you cap NIL because it's an outside company or group of investors basically paying an athlete or paying anyone. Anybody can pay anyone. Somebody can pay some 13-year-old on TikTok and say, we want to give you $10,000 to do X, Y, and Z because your videos are really popular. So this is what this is about. It's about people being able to sell their brand, and there's no cap on that. The only way that I would think, and again, I could be completely wrong and be missing this, but I would think that the only way that that could be capped is if college football incorporated, just like the NFL. The NFL can institute a cap because they're running a business and say, well, if we make this much money, the players get that much money. As soon as our revenue goes here, then their percentage goes here. And if we start to lose money and make less, then they will make less. And it's all tied to business and running a business. But otherwise, when there are just private entities out there giving money to athletes, I don't know how you cap that.
Yeah, it would mean that you would have to, exactly what you're saying, Mark, and you're not off. That would mean that the student athletes become employees of the university. And I don't see Florida State I don't see NIL going that direction, so to speak. I'm not saying that schools won't ever be allowed to give NIL deals to athletes due to their abilities in the classroom, because I think Michigan does it, where they give their athletes like basically bonuses for doing well in the classroom, but it can't be pay for play. So I don't worry about that, and I don't think that that's going to happen. And the NCAA is trying to stay as far away from NIL as they possibly can. That's why they have so many, not enough rules, so to speak. It's very limited on rules. So I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think the athletes want to stay away from being paid for play. I really do, because then that works the other way. You're not performing halfway through the season, bye, you're cut, you're gone, just like an NFL player. All right. John Sarian is asking about the upcoming Junior Day and if you guys know of any particular players, especially at wide receiver, that are showing up for that.
We're gonna have to get I need to get Dustin, or we need to get a recruiting guy on here, because my expertise is not in the recruiting names, because right now this is the point of year where I'm starting to learn those names, and about 4 months from now I'm going to have a list of names and I'm going to maybe remember at least, and then in 6 months from there I'm going to know every name. But at this point in time, and on February 8th, there's a lot of names, but Florida State did a good job last year. Got to go to a few of them. I don't know if this would be, I guess that wouldn't be necessarily Junior Day, but I guess it would be Junior Day with Camden and Camden Fryer, and then you've got, I'm sure, Cromenhawk would be coming over to throw. But I'm if I can just talk about a wide receiver that Florida State has currently committed, legacy guy here with Camden Fryer, extremely talented. Florida State is going to do a good job, I think, of holding on to him. You know, a lot of schools across the country have offered, including Alabama, Nick Saban. Just skilled guy that likes to go up for the ball and come down with it. And he performed very well. He went against a lot of the 2023 current signees that are on campus right now that were competing against him. Florida State held that camp and had a lot of talent there, but Camden Fryer came away with that one looking really good. Him and Vendravius Jacobs, who's a year ahead of him. He's currently on Florida State's campus right now, going through tour of duty and going through his first semester of school. Camden Fryer and Vendravius really stood out during that, but I can't tell you guys enough. Once you get to see him in person, he's also put on a little bit of size too, but those two work together also, I believe, in 7-on-7. So they're already building that chemistry, and, you know, we're a year behind, but a year ahead. Is going to be fun to watch those guys continue to build, because I think that's what Mike Norvell looked way ahead, early ahead. I mean, if you look at Kromenhoek, who's Florida State's 2024 quarterback commit, and that really, like you were talking about earlier, Chris, and that big 2024 class that Florida State's done a really good job in, that's your future at quarterback. You know, I think before it was Altmaier a couple of years ago. You know, that didn't end up working, but I think right now this is Kromenhoek, and it never was going to be, you know, Tate Rodemaker. It wasn't going to be Chuba Purdy. You know, those two guys were trying to get them in while you can. You got to build depth, and you got to have quarterbacks in that room. Those weren't your future. And, you know, Luke Kromenhoek is that. And, you know, the kid didn't even start a game until this last year and took him to state. So really, really impressive and evaluations from Florida State staff, Mike Norvell, and what they've been able to do, including Coach Tokars.
Yeah. And then what I will say is about, as far as wide receivers go, for the junior day, they'll possibly be coming in. The biggest name that I think you keep paying attention to that Florida State hasn't officially locked down, that I think Florida State's pushing extremely hard for. I think Coach Dugans is doing a really good job. Is someone like JoJo Trader. You keep your eyes on him. He's visited a few times. You want to keep that pressure there. What I mean by pressure is communication. Make sure that you communicate with him the same way that you did with Hakeem Williams for the 2023 class. And I think that Coach Dugans is doing a phenomenal job at speaking to the 2024 class. Personally, I also think that Mike Norvell is doing a particularly very well job in the same scenario, because it seems like wide receivers, you know, a lot of people are worried about wide receivers because of what we brought into the transfer portal. And when those guys decide to leave, what do we have left? But just like what Logan just said, Vendravius is going to end up being a really special piece at Florida State, along with Hakeem Williams. And there's quite a few other guys that, you know, will be stepping up that maybe we don't know their name yet as fans because we haven't seen them. And maybe they weren't that 5-star recruit. But you remember that we got TJ Abrams, the wide receiver that committed verbally to Florida State for the 2024 class. He's a very special piece, and Florida State's doing a really good job at continuing to make him feel like he's part of the class, and make sure that he knows that he's got a spot here at Florida State because of the abilities that he has. I think Florida State will, here in the near future, have quite a few guys verbally commit to Florida State. Not necessarily just wide receiver, but I think you pick up one or two more over the next couple of months for sure. Remember, everyone, 2024 class, this is really early. So that there's a lot of stuff that's going on. I'm not saying that you don't want someone to verbally commit, but you have a lot of time in between now and early signing period in December. So you don't want kids to get bored. And when everything's so relatively just right in your hand with the cell phones and things, you have to keep them entertained. You have to make sure that they want to stay here at Florida State. So sometimes them verbally committing later on in the process is what I'm more of a fan of. I more or less don't worry about recruiting so much in February. Start July, August era, and that's when I really want to see us getting hot on the trail to make sure that guys are understanding how bad we want them.
This next comment / question coming in from Ingvar kind of leads us into what Chris was talking about previously with a lot of the stuff that he's working on at Spear Addicts. So Chris, we'll turn it over to you in regards to what are some of the metrics you're working on, what's going to be available there on your platform.
Yeah. So we had done a thing to where there was a PFF grade that came out as far as returning production and stuff to that nature as far as multiple teams go. But they were specific on teams that maybe weren't looked at as a top 10 team. Obviously, at the beginning of the 2022 season, and now after the performance that these teams have put on, there was like 6 teams that were in this nature of talk. Florida State being the number 1 team. There's been multiple analysts come out and say that Florida State's their sleeper team for next year, which is this year. There's multiple people saying that Florida State's that dark horse with the amount of production that they've got coming back. Different metrics off of different, you get different numbers, but they're all relatively close to the 81 to 84% of returning on offense, 78% to 80% on defense is returning production. Florida State has the most returning production across college football, regardless of Power 5. Across the complete nation, Florida State is still at the top of that mountain. They have the most returning production, regardless of what analytics that you use. Florida State has, obviously, Johnny Wilson's coming back. He had a couple of 200-plus games this year. You've got Trey Benson that's coming back that almost had 1,000 yards in the regular season. You've got Lawrence Toafili. I mean, I can keep naming them, but that's the return of production. So what you do is on the offense side of the ball is you take how much offense production did they put on the field, how many touchdowns did they have, how many yards that they have receiving or rushing, stuff to that nature. And then when you turn it back over to the defensive side, you base that off of how many tackle for loss, or how many sacks, interceptions, interrupted passes, etc. So you put all of those things together, and that's what basically gives you the evaluation back, stating that this amount of production is coming back for your team, because this was, let's say Tatum Bethune for matter, was the leader in tackles for loss, and he had, let's just say 27, which is a lot. But let's say that he did, then he's returning. That means that 29.3% of your returning tackle for loss is coming back. So then you go across the board with who's coming back and what they were able to produce last year. So that's how you come up with that number. And I think that depth for Florida State is the biggest reason of production, because of the returning players on top of the guys that are behind them that are also returning that didn't move on somewhere else. And I think that's going to change after spring, because I think we'll have some more attrition in spring. So I think there's going to be some guys leave that right now are being accounted for. I don't think that we keep every one of them. So we very well might not be, come spring, the team that's got the most production returning. And then again, we very well could be.
I'm guessing you guys would be okay with Tatum Bethune racking up 27 tackles for loss. That would be a decent number. Logan, let us know what you've got going on. I know you got some big, exciting things starting.
Yeah, we've got a show tonight with Jamie Robinson. That will be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. Now that he's a former Seminole, a little bit easier to get access to the guys. He just had a really nice week at the Senior Bowl in Alabama. So looking forward to picking his brain on that. We'll talk the league. We'll talk his time with FSU, Mike Norvell, and get his thoughts on giving Mike an extension there that Florida State did earlier today. So I want to pick his brain on a lot of things. I think this is a player that really stuck around. He could have left last year. He stayed. Early talks of NIL is one of those ways of being able to keep him in Tallahassee. So I think that will be a really fun interview. Have a good relationship there with him. And then on the other side, on Monday night, we'll be debuting and launching our show with Brian Stork, Calculated Chaos with him. That one will be on Monday night at 7 p.m. on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Will be a live show with film that Brian Stork has cut up on his own. He'll be using the drawing board and everything. I'll kind of just be here reading the comments, kind of sending things his way, and it'll just be us chopping it up a little bit. No sponsors, nothing like that, so we can kind of say whatever we want. Brian doesn't have a job right now. He's a stay-at-home dad. He just had a newborn not too long ago. So he's the stay-at-home dad. So he wanted something to do. He was just getting a little bored and was like, you know what, why not do a film show since he loves watching it so much. So I think it's going to be fun. So Monday nights will be going back and get a deep dive into that Florida State versus Oklahoma game. And I just think he'll give a great perspective from the time that he was at FSU, his time in New England with Tom Brady, winning a Super Bowl in his first year as a rookie. And then, I want to pick his brain a lot on this current team that I think, as he's told me, he feels very strongly about where this program is headed under Mike Norvell. So I think that will be a great show that we'll do. It won't be a weekly thing. It will just kind of be like, hey, you know what, we haven't done one in a while, or hey, this is the right time to do it. And we've got the first show being the FSU versus Oklahoma game. And then the second one will be Florida State versus Clemson 2013 rewind with a handful of guests there, which will be really interesting. Then we're going to go into the recruiting realm too, and he's going to go in and give some analysis on a few players from this 2023 class, including Brock Glenn, Hakeem Williams, and a few others. So really looking forward to that. And I want to pick his brain too on Alex Atkins. It would be great to have Alex Atkins on for one of those shows. So just a different way of trying to create some content, definitely during the off season, and then we'll relay into the games on Saturdays once we get into the fall. So trying to do it. Everybody, there's so many great FSU platforms out there. It's just kind of trying to find a way and navigate a different way of doing things. So we're hopeful, fingers crossed. Hopefully things work out well. Been working on it for a little while now.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is awesome.
Appreciate it.
We try to navigate a different way to do things, and that's why we have Jason on. I guess
that's right.
That's, the angle there. That's the only one I can come up with.
Well, Jason, I guess he had to go. What is he? Is he at a salad bar right now? I don't know what he's doing tonight. He didn't want to join us.
Yeah, the salad bar was more important, I guess. I don't know what the deal was, but we want to remind everyone as people are starting to filter in. I think this Twitter hang up held us up a little bit because we typically get a bit of a boost when we send out some tweets and let people know, hey, remember, we're here. And then I send one out typically as we get into the show as well. So no tweets to promote the show today, but we got about 55 on the line. So what you guys need to do is come on back next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And also, you miss most of the show as well. So what you need to do is the video post. As soon as we get done, you can watch what you missed. Jen Ferry brings up a pretty good point here in terms of, we talk about recruiting. Okay, that high 4-star, that 5-star, but it's also about depth. Of course, the better programs in the country can come at you with waves of talent and, especially along the defensive front in certain positions, and can also obviously sustain injuries. So, Chris, your thoughts about recruiting to also build that depth that's needed?
Yeah, I think that Florida State's going to be in a much better situation for the 2023 year versus 2022. And I'll give you an example. For 2022 season, when we lost Fabian Lovett for that just crazy stretch of time, teams were able to run up the middle on us pretty much as they wanted to through the A gap or the C gap. We had a huge problem with imploding the pocket itself. From what I mean by imploding is pushing the pocket from within out, because you want to force the quarterback towards your defensive ends, being the more athletic linemen, so they can keep up with him and keep him contained. When Fabian Lovett wasn't in, we had a pretty rough go at it. We weren't able to get many sacks. Wasn't able to bat down any balls really from the offensive line. So this year, I think it's going to be completely different when you're bringing in people like Fisk. You're also bringing in Edmond, and you've also got a defensive tackle that I personally think, if he's in the rotation, which I expect him to be, an Ioto Afasi, which also wasn't able to play last year because he reclassified kind of late and pushed him back from a 23 to a 22. So he wasn't able to play all year. So your defensive line for sure is going to have plenty of rotation, and you're going to have depth there that if Fabian has to even set out for a couple of plays, you now have someone in there like Fisk or Ioto Afasi to be able to continue to push just as well as what Fabo's doing. And then the only room that I'm really worried about as far as depth goes, and they're making it better and better, is probably the DB side of things. We have plenty of bodies there. We just have a lot of question marks. There's a lot of guys that I don't know if they're going to take that next initial step, because some guys that we had kind of digressed last year. They kind of took a step back. And I'm really hoping that those couple of gentlemen decide to take that step forward, leap forward a little bit this year. But I think all in all, for the team, Florida State's going to be a much better product on the field due to what we've been able to bring up from the 2022 class. I don't think offensive lineman's going to show you any problems throughout the year, just due to the gentlemen like Quayshawn Sapp, and gentlemen to that nature. I think there's going to be a plenty of depth piece there. So if someone is hurt on offensive line, I mean, last year we started off with a bang, losing Caden Lyles, losing I don't know why I can't remember the young man's name right now. I've even interviewed him a couple times. No, Turntime's gone. Anyways,
it happens. It happens to me too.
You just said his name earlier too. He tore his bicep. Played one game against LSU. That's where he tore his bicep.
Oh, okay. Bless Harris.
Bless Harris. Bless Harris. After one game, we didn't have him anymore. And Bless should be coming back this season stronger than he has been. And then you brought over someone like Casey Roddick, and I think Casey Roddick from Colorado is going to be a huge piece for Florida State. I also think with Mo coming back and multiple other guys, it just creates more depth. So yes, I think Florida State will be a much better product on the field as far as rotation 2 and 3 go.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to just mention something real quick, Mark, because I don't need to say, Chris ran through them all. But one thing I think that we might be forgetting and would have probably been one of our biggest question marks, at least going into the fall, would be, what about if Tate Rodemaker doesn't say he's not coming back this next season? You're looking at A.J. Duffy and a true freshman with Brock Glenn going in. And, I want to see a big spring out of A.J. Duffy. What I saw last spring, a lot of work to be done. And I saw a switch kind of whenever we saw Jordan Travis after those 3-game losses. I saw kind of a switch there on A.J. Duffy's side. And I think that was from looking up to Jordan Travis and took practices a lot seriously. And a lot of other things, just making sure he's focused, making it on time, watching film, making sure he's doing all those kind of things. I want to see a big jump from him in the spring. But if you don't have Tate Rodemaker next season, that puts a lot of pressure onto Jordan Travis to stay healthy, which he did this last season. Yes, I mean, he got a lot of guys got banged up, including Jordan Travis at that Louisville game on the road. But, Tate Rodemaker came in and did what he did. We've talked about that multiple times, but I think it's pivotal for Florida State to have a backup when need be. And sometimes that's where if you have a guy going down early in the game, you've got to have a pretty good backup to come in, know the system, know what he's doing, has already built chemistry. So I think that's something that, at least from the question there earlier from Jen asking about, is there better backups? I think you're going to see a better backup out of Tate Rodemaker too. Another year in the system, yada, yada, yada. You just need guys like that in that quarterback room. I don't want to rely on an A.J. Duffy. I don't want to rely on a true freshman with Brock Glenn. Let them learn behind both Jordan Travis and a Tate Rodemaker with the time being. That's something that Mike Norvell has been able to do now. This is a true quarterback room at the moment, in my opinion. This is the best quarterback room they've had yet under Mike Norvell's tenure.
Back to the depth comment. I saw a list this week. I didn't realize that Fisk was that highly regarded. I saw a top 10 transfer list, and this wasn't top 10 at his position. This was top 10, period. Yeah. And on one of the major platforms, it was 247 or somebody that had him in the top 10. I just didn't realize he was that highly regarded.
Yeah, talented, really, really talented, can take care of business on the inside, which Florida State needed. And I think they looked back at last season and was like, damn, once Fabian Lovett's gone, anybody can run up. Mark, you can take it for 5 yards. Chris has got it for 6. Give me 4, for the first down. That's just exactly what was going on the inside of Florida State's defensive line. That was atrocious at times and embarrassing. You relied a lot on the linebackers to come down and fill the gaps and have to, whenever you've got a hole open like that, it puts your linebackers in tough situations. And Florida State had a really rough time there going into the second level because they had no type of concrete play there on the inside, and Florida State is going to be able to add that along with Darrell Jackson, Miami defensive tackle transfer, to add in that rotation. I was really disappointed with Jared Jackson's play this season. I know he was kind of dealing with injuries left and right, things like that, and also, now Malcolm Ray also was kind of dealing with a few things here and there, but I wasn't so impressed with that. I think the younger group coming in, we're going to see quite a bit of, a Bishop Thomas, who is a funny guy to be around, but, is being really coached hard by Odell Higgins. And then moving up from that, you've got Antavius Woody, who moved from offensive line over to defensive tackle, ferocious, just kind of like your physicality animal that you're going to have there. Still has a lot to work on with Odell Higgins. I'm glad that he's on Odell's side to be coached hard, because that's just a player that's what it's going to take. We knew that coming out of high school. And then lastly, right here, Daniel Lyons, the one that got the most burn last year as a true freshman on the defensive line. The strides that he's taken and the competitive battles. I mean, I saw multiple reps with him going against Maurice Smith, Florida State starting center, and that didn't look like a true freshman. And I don't think Maurice Smith was thinking that a true freshman would have that power and kind of start getting a hang of things so early on. But he's going to see a lot of playing time next year. So add those younger guys in and see what you got. And Jared Jackson's off to do his thing. But I was just pretty damn disappointed in what I saw outside of Fabian Lovett. I mean, it showed how much it impacted not only the front line, but that whole entire defense, man. It screwed up a lot of things. So I'm looking forward to the Fabian Lovett Fisk / Darrell Jackson kind of combo that we'll see in 2023, and some of those younger guys getting some burn after another good spring ahead.
Before we wrap it up, Chris, any parting shots? Anything else you wanted to get in tonight?
I will say this. I had a really cool, and I'm going to make this as short as possible. We had a really cool Twitter space last week. We had Antonio Cromartie come on with us, and I was pushing for Antonio Cromartie to be the next DB coach at Florida State in a huge manner. I wanted it so bad that it was probably ridiculous at some points. But we got Antonio Cromartie's complete blessing and said how great of a hire Patrick Surtain was, and how much respect he had for Patrick Surtain and what his abilities are. And obviously after the hire, I was extremely satisfied with what Patrick Surtain is as a coach on top of it. But to get Antonio Cromartie's blessing, talking about how great of a coach he is and how great he's going to do here at Florida State. And then he threw out a thing about Coach Norvell that he told me I was, by all means, I could share, that he respects Coach Norvell probably more than any other coach on this planet right now. Reason being is because most coaches, he did apply for the DB job here at Florida State as an Antonio Cromartie. And he said that Norvell reached out to him via text message and stated, we're going to go a different route. And we really appreciate, you trying to get the position, and we think highly of you and what you've done and what you were capable of doing, but we're gonna go with this guy. Which they didn't tell him who they were going with at the time, but they did let him know the night before that they weren't going with him. So he said that he had huge respect for that, because most coaches, they don't say anything. They don't come back and rebuttal with anything. So Coach Norvell taking his time to let him know that they were going a different route was really cool. And then on top of that, it just shows the type of class and professionalism that Coach Norvell works with. And for the people that were asking me, I haven't said this part yet, but the only way that Antonio Cromartie goes anywhere is if he's getting offered a DB position coach, a linebacker position coach, and there was one more that I don't recall. But those are the only ways that he's taking a job somewhere. He doesn't want to be an off-the-field staff member, and he doesn't want to be an analyst of any sort. He wants to be able to coach. That's what he's dying to do. So we'll see in the future if something opens up and Florida State gets him or not. But he said that's what he would be open to.
Everybody, you can catch Chris Frazier at Spear Addicts on your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube. And we appreciate Chris filling in and love to get the perspective from Chris. And again, Logan and the guys get together tonight at 8. Tonight at 8 with Logan and the guys. And once again, we want to make sure everybody's aware of Logan's new venture and when's that going to be available for everybody.
That's going to be on Monday night, this upcoming Monday night, with Brian Stork, former 2013 national champion, 2013 Remington Award winner, and Super Bowl champion. So looking forward to having him on and having a lot of the FSU fans come hang out and really take a different look at film and hopefully have some good laughs with it and talk about some fun stories from the good old times. And it seems like we're heading into a new wave of good old times about 10 years later after that 2013 national championship. So looking forward to hopping on there. And we're both, I think Brian might be more excited than me. He is super stoked. It's been about 2 months in the works. So I'm really excited for this debut on Monday night. So appreciate it, Mark, for having both me and Chris on this evening.
Folks, hit the like button on your way out and get back here next Wednesday at 6 Eastern time. And if you want to go troll, you got that opportunity in about 3 minutes on the Miami channel. You can catch Cam Underwood and myself, and we're talking Miami football. And of course, they've got a new DC to talk about. So we'll be there in just a few minutes. Catch us then. All right, guys, we will see you soon. Appreciate you being here.
Go Noles.